It's Friday, November 3rd, 2023. All right, we are recording at a bit of a different time, so you may hear some background noise. Lando has some construction going on.
Construction going on right below
You might hear what sounds like a furious person farting against a rubber wall. That would be construction, most of the time probably. And we don't care, so we're just going to go with it. So no big deal.
You can't really blame it. You can't really blame it on me for gas though, because I've done this show for years and I have let some huge ones rip, and they've never been picked up by the.
Well, sure,
mic.
No.
You know, and I always thought they would be, and then they never were. So
I just don't want emails coming in saying, "Is somebody have? If that's somebody, they need to go see a doctor right away." So I'm heading that off. So let me do my shill segment. Then I have a funny thing up front. So patreon.com/Ozone Nightmare. Go to the show homepage. You will see some rounded squares on the right side. Those will have various links, including one to a PayPal donation option, one that looks like a book, which will take you to Lando's Amazon author page. The skull will take you to my art links, and the YouTube icon on the very bottom will take you to the show's YouTube page, which does have stuff worth watching, which is not something I get to say very often. So you can go there and you can see the videos that I've been editing, which I am happy to be done with that for a little bit because it's been a lot in a very compressed time. Now, there is a funny story. Ironically enough, I have complained many times about YouTube and how they block things. So of all the stuff I've uploaded lately, what they chose to block most recently was the show we did where we talked about Dr. X. So our previous episode, because now all the shows get posted to YouTube. They don't have clips or anything in them. They just have a show background, but that's an automatic feature that Libsyn does. So I'm like, why not? Some people do like to actually listen to even non-video stuff through YouTube. They just run it off there, maybe on their phone or connected to a speaker or something. So I don't care. It doesn't cost anything. And so that thing gets posted automatically. And I think
which one was that?
The last episode. Remember the one with the crazy doctors and all the weird...
Oh, yeah. Your movie. Yeah.
Yeah, the movie review. Yes, yeah, Dr. X. And so at first nothing happened. And then I want to say 3 hours or so after it posted, I get an email that says, Warner Brothers has blocked your video in all countries. And I thought...
Is it the sound clips?
Yeah, specifically for the long sound clip, which isn't even a continuous sound clip. It's chopped, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I went, I don't care. I didn't do any effort on that. That's just posted with a background, so they can go to the show homepage. Why even bother disputing it? But then I thought, I didn't dispute the John Carpenter one because I needed it to get out at the same time the audio did. I didn't even bother. But I thought, you know what? I want to see what this dispute process looks like. Let's just see. Because, I mean, they're not going to let it go because it's Warner Brothers and they're not going to actually watch it or anything. But I'm curious what this looks like because, you know, I as much as I complain, I've never actually gone through the dispute process. So I figured I should at least know a little bit about what I'm talking about when I complain about this company. I don't think I've ever complained. Well, I have complained about the dispute process because, and I verified this, there is no way to talk to a person, which I think is the ultimate failing of this, is that there is no option that, let's say
are you just dealing with AI and logarithms?
I don't know what you're dealing with. Honestly, nobody does. And YouTube has vaguely described it, but there's no specifics. So you don't really know how this thing works. This is the big problem with a lot of these companies is you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. But I thought, all right, let me see this. So basically I said, all right, I think this is a fair use clip. So there's all these different options. And half of them just take you to info pages where they're like, just because you think it's fair use doesn't mean it is, little boys and girls. So don't dispute it unless you're really sure. I'm like, fuck you. I'm an intelligent human being. Let me get to the part where I can say something. So it comes up, and you do get now, which I don't think existed before, but I don't know for sure. People can tell me if they've ever disputed something. You get two options. One is dispute, and the other is appeal. And I'm like, okay, what's the difference? Dispute says, we will let you write out an explanation. You can select from a couple of things where you're saying, I'm actually not using these clips. They're lying, which isn't the case here. Then there's another one about, I think I own this, which I don't. And then there's one that says, I believe this is fair use, which a review, I think, falls under fair use. So I'm like, okay, that's what I would pick. And then I'm like, what's the difference between dispute and appeal? So dispute says they have 30 days to respond. And if they come back and say, no, we still want to block it, then you can then appeal it. And if you lose the appeal or we find that it was fraudulent, then you get a copyright strike. And 3 copyright strikes, and then your channel is deleted. Gone.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So I'm like, okay, got it. And then I looked at appeal, and appeal says, okay, if you appeal it, they have to respond within 7 days. But if they say your claim is still incorrect, you just get a strike automatically. No further action. So I went, okay, I don't care enough about this to risk a copyright strike, because I do want the channel to stay up because we post games. I mean, not that I could create another channel in 5 minutes. Who cares? But I'm like, the audio is the important part. This isn't like a video I worked on for a week. So I figured, all right, why do the appeal thing? Let's try the dispute thing and just see what happens, because I'm curious. So I do the dispute thing, and it comes up, okay, you can write up to 5,000 words. So I basically, I started off angry, and I'm like, no, back off. On the off chance a human being reads this. And I basically said, this is an audio-only clip, less than, I think it was a 2-minute clip. I think it was 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I said less than or around 2 minutes in length. There is no video, and it is in a review that is trying to get people who probably would never think to watch this movie because of its age to watch this movie. Well? 32.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's 1932.
Yes, and so I said, the entire goal of this review was, number one, it was positive. I think it's a good movie. The clips are to emphasize what I like about it. And I point out in my review that the reason to watch it is the visuals, which we don't have. I said, what I'm trying to do here is hopefully get some people who may only ever watch YouTube for all their entertainment to branch out a little bit and watch something else that I think is worth seeing. And that's how I phrased it. I'm like, okay, sent. And I figured, okay, a month from now, they're going to come back and they're just going to deny it because a machine's going to look at it.
Yeah.
And shockingly, they lifted the claim within 30 minutes.
That's interesting.
So, as much as I complain, I have to also point out when a system actually works properly. And in this case, it worked properly because not only did they lift it, but they lifted it really quick. Now, I don't know if they examine keywords. I don't know what's doing this. It makes me wonder if a person did read this. Whether it would be from YouTube or Warner Brothers, it would have to be Warner Brothers because they would have to authorize it. So maybe somebody did read this thing. Because I can't imagine an algorithm for Warner Brothers would go through that and care. That seems like somebody actually looked at it. I think I did point out, if you listen to the review, you will hear, they probably didn't listen to the whole review, but maybe they skimmed it a little bit. I wonder if somebody from Warner Brothers did not actually listen to it, which is a positive sign. And the fact that plus it's a movie from the 30s. I doubt they're getting a ton of money from it. But I pointed out that I was trying to get people to see it. And so maybe the fact that it was a positive review, maybe they thought we were making fun of it or something like that until I pointed that out. I don't know. So rare case. So now I'll dispute them more often because why not? If I write it well, maybe somebody is reading these things. I don't know. But again, it's only audio. So it's not like you're not going to get that much from it watching on YouTube, but at least you can now because they blocked it everywhere. It said blocked in all countries. Now, of course, the Libsyn feed is fine. The audio part was always there. We've never had a problem with that because I just either Libsyn doesn't care or they don't care enough about pure audio. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I complain a lot about YouTube and very fairly, I will back up all my complaints, but I don't think it's right to just complain and then not point out that the system did work in this case. So I would say if you're like me, because my first instinct was don't even bother, just let it be blocked. They're never going to release it. But I did it anyway, more out of curiosity. and they released it. So if you do stuff on YouTube and you're like me and you're just bitter and angry about it, you might want to actually dispute it. I wouldn't say appeal necessarily, because you lose 3 of those and your channel can be blown away. But because the nice part about from what I understand of the dispute thing is, if you dispute it and they say, nope, we're staying with it, and you just do nothing, there's no impact on the channel. It's if you then appeal it. And I think that's because then they basically go to the company and tell them they have to respond. And probably the company gets pissed off if they feel like they have to devote time to something they don't care about. Although the the speed of the response to this makes me wonder. So I don't know. Just thought I would. If anybody has any insight into what goes on YouTube, feel free to tell me. I don't know.
It's quizzical. It is very quizzical to me because it just
Well, the block feels like it was made by an algorithm. It probably listens for a certain duration of certain things and immediately responds. Like, I get that. That you can just do pattern matching very simply. And it's probably a certain duration, because I played 5 or 6 clips, but the only one they blocked was the long one. So my suspicion is that because they crossed the 2-minute mark, that's why they seized on it. So that, I believe, was driven by some kind of automatic checking system, a content ID. But the response being that quick seems like it had to be human-driven, because I don't know that a machine would read that response and then be able to cross-check it in that time. It's just, maybe. I don't know what they're using to do this stuff. Maybe they've got machines that are good enough for that. These machine learning stuff is brilliant and fast when it has the proper data, but it's also trying to parse human intent, which is where it usually falls down.
I wonder if, to some degree, you've got a situation where they go after everything that even remotely picks up, and then any challenge on a certain tier, they just let go. Do you know what I mean?
That's also possible. It's very possible.
Because it's legally, right? Legally, to make it financially viable for you, you are going to have tiers of what you go after. Now, you're going to go after everything. If you've got an algorithm or software set up for it, you're going to go after everything you can, right? Because it's yours. But there's stuff you'll lose money on, and there's stuff that doesn't deserve a second look. So they must have an algorithm set up that basically says, okay, this number of things, we're going to go after them, and if they dispute it, we'll let it go. We don't care. Then the next tier is we're going to go after these things, and if they dispute it, we'll come back at them. And so on until you get to the top tier, which is people who are actively just playing their movies for money. You know what I mean? So I wonder if it's a tiered system and you're just at the bottom of it and you disputed it and they were like, whatever.
Maybe. So I just
maybe
to be clear,
maybe they agreed with you as well, but I mean, it's the whole.
Well, one thing I want to point out is to get the timing right on it. So they blocked it 19 minutes after it posted. So they blocked it at 12:19.
I mean, and that's fast too.
Well, and that's why at first I'm like, it couldn't have been that long, because these systems work way faster than that. And then they released it at 1:42, and I think that was within half an hour of me, because I disputed it pretty quickly. So
I wonder if they've got
it was back up.
I wonder if they've got you on a list now because of the previous videos. So now
they don't bother with that. These things sweep everything.
Okay.
Everything. So, it's and we've gotten monetization blocks on almost everything that's up there that's game or what. And I don't care about that because we're not monetizing. So I pointed that out too. Maybe that helped. I said, this is a non-monetized channel. I am not trying to make money for this. If anything, I'm trying to drive revenue. I think I used the word revenue. I think I said I'm trying to drive revenue towards this film. Maybe that helped. Maybe I used the magic words. I'm not monetized and I'm trying to give you revenue. That would probably trigger an automatic response. So I don't know. It was just like I said, I don't like when people just complain and then don't ever point out when something actually is done properly. And if anybody else is like me and just doesn't even bother, you might want to at least dispute it and then decide whether you want to appeal it. If you really think you've got backing for it, go for it. But
if it's worth
the dispute the dispute only costs you the time to write something. That's it. Otherwise, there's no impact on your channel. And worst case, you're just where you started, which is blocked. So you might want to do it. That's all.
Yeah.
Perhaps in an alternate universe, there are people reading these things.
Yeah, I mean, ideally you would have.
I'm segueing for you here.
Oh, I'm aware. Universe. I know, but I'm thinking about that idea of.
Yeah, I don't know.
If suddenly we had people doing these jobs and they weren't just digital jobs anymore, do you know what I mean? I mean, granted, these are the kinds of jobs that people complained about in like the 70s, where they're like, "What do you do?" They're like, "I read the complaints board for my company." You know what I mean? Like it's
what I would hope happens, and I have no idea if this actually happens or not, is I have no problem with the automated system catching it. I understand that so much is uploaded to YouTube that there is no way you could hire you. That would be very, very difficult to actually keep up with. Right.
Yeah.
And the problem, to be fair to YouTube, which I don't generally want to be, but I have to be if I'm being objective about it, is if they don't keep up with this stuff, they will start being sued into oblivion by these other companies. So this is not YouTube that cares. It is the companies that own the rights.
Oh,
to these
no,
things.
absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So having this kind of fast system, I mean, 20 minutes is a fast response. Having that kind of system in place is fine. What I hope is that when you appeal it, somebody is reading it, which is what this feels like. That makes sense.
It could just be looking for keywords, like you said, no revenue, like phrases like that.
Yeah, not monetized. Yeah, I think that's
exactly.
You know.
Well, yeah. So Joe was trying to seg us away to my weird shit, but I don't really have much today to talk about. But I had this one article I read, and I wasn't going to bring it up at first because my brain is still trying to fully understand what the fuck I just read. But essentially, so you know Penrose, right? The guy, he's a physicist.
Yes, I'm familiar. He's a Nobel.
Yeah.
Is he a Nobel
what's
Peace
his
Prize
name?
winner or something?
Yeah, he is. What's his
Roger
first name?
Penrose.
Roger Penrose, right?
There he is.
Is it Penrose? Penrose or Penrose?
It's
Penrose.
Penrose.
Okay.
Is Pen with an N, as in
Yeah, no,
Nancy.
and I love Penrose tiles. I think it's a really neat concept, the non-repeating tiles. But this article is about a theory he has about I guess the article, the title, the Forbes article, which is actually very good, has kind of a sensationalist title, but it is kind of bizarre for what it is. So essentially, the laws of physics break down a little bit when you get really small, right? Into like into quantum mechanics, right? Now, I enjoy reading about this stuff, but I am in no way an expert of any kind. So I want to talk about it because it's really fascinating, and it harks back to something that I've talked about before with you, but I'm not sure I fully understand what's going on here. So essentially, you have these particles at the quantum level that appear to be in many places at once and to have almost like limitless possibilities, right?
Is that quantum entanglement?
Yeah, it's quantum entanglement is part of that. But when we perceive them, they become stationary. They become
that's the
fixed.
Observation state thing.
Yes, exactly.
That's the Schrodinger's cat. The act of observing changes the properties of the thing
exactly.
observed.
And so,
see, I paid attention to some things.
So some people's idea is that the particle is not terminating, but it's self-stabilizing, and that it creates the reality, right? Okay. Whereas Penrose has this theory that essentially when we look at one of these particles, which, I mean, you know, these particles are the underlying of everything, right? We make them stationary. It is consciousness that stabilizes them into a fixed reality, right? And that our perception of it and our focusing on it basically is the event that causes the particle to become fixed and thus terminates all the possible realities, right? So there is no multiverse. Whenever there is a multiverse up until the moment that you perceive it, at which point the future is fixed, right? Or at least that particular point in time is fixed. Now, I thought this was funny because remember a while back I told you that I sometimes joke that my perception of time is that that some mechanic on some level is constantly trying to find the best version forward through time where you don't die, where you aren't crippled, where you aren't destroyed. Do you know what I mean? This idea that there is some sort of psychological temporal mechanic where each of our consciousness in the background is trying to find the best foot forward through time that puts off our demise and destruction. And that to some degree, death is when you get to that point where there is no best foot forward anymore, right? Or you love something enough, or you care about something enough that you are willing to choose your demise because on a subconscious level, the thing that you're dying for is more important than your life. Thus, you're still choosing the best future forward. It's like if you had to die to save your wife. You choose to die, and in that reality that you've chosen, your wife survived, but you don't, but that's more important to you, right?
Right.
I just thought I had, it was kind of a whim idea, like I was kind of thinking about it, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny? And then I read this article and I thought, oh, it's interesting how you are, his theory is that you are essentially creating the stability of the particles, that you are, on some level, you are picking the moment forward, the particle's state. I do not truly understand it. I got to reread this article. It is so crazy. Like, oh yeah, and it's retroactive as well. So the whole idea is that once we see it, it retroactively goes back in time. It sets itself. Like, there's so many aspects of this that are so weird. You should read the article if you want some fun, mind-bending shit that'll make you look at reality and go, wow, things here are way weirder than I ever thought they were. It's a really interesting thing. I do believe that there is a dimension of science that is waiting for us to fully explore it, and that it'll be the weirdest aspect of our existence as human beings, if we can get there, which is going to be these crazy mechanics of quantum physics, where it's like, like you said, things like entanglement. It's like, can you entangle people? I mean, if you could entangle all the particles in one person and another, could those two people be in each other's places at the same time? And how would your consciousness even perceive that? So, as a science fiction lover, this shit is stranger than a lot of the science fiction that I've read. Joe's got the article linked on the show. It's worth a read. It's long and it's technical. If you glean even half of what the hell they're talking about, it's a lot of fun. Especially if you're like me and you like to dream about the bizarre, and what it means. Yeah. I mean, it just says some, and then like they're making up. I love science where they have to make up new terms. I love that, where that's like, well, there's no word to describe. Like they're talking about, I think they're called hypertubes. They're talking about structures in the brain that are specifically for dealing with this level of like quantum mechanics. And Penrose is working with a biologist. And it's really wacky stuff. I love it. And they had to come up with a term for what they thought the function in the brain was. And they call it hypertubes or something like that. Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. So, I mean, I adore this kind of science, but I do accept that it is often beyond my ability to fully comprehend. I mean, you have phrases like retrocausality is the proposal
wave
that
function collapse.
Hold on. Retrocausality is the proposal that a measurement in the present can change a particle's properties even before the measurement was made. Like, I fucking love that. And there's so much that we don't understand about the nature of our reality as is. I mean, I think I said this a while back in one of the shows. If you think that science is done, that we've learned everything we can learn, then you just aren't paying attention, because there's just so much weird shit out there waiting for us.
I just like the fact that they describe things as quantum weirdness, that they don't even have a better way to say it.
No,
we'll just call it weird.
They don't, because shit doesn't behave. And that's one of the things I love in there, when they're talking about how the laws of the quantum mechanics does not behave under the laws, under the laws of physics. And you're like, yeah, that is scary, because science is great in that when done correctly, its whole mindset is, this is what we know right now, but this isn't absolute, right? And the laws of physics have kind of been held up for a while But the more they get into quantum mechanics, the more it's kind of it's sitting there going, the rules aren't the rules, and you're like, great. So what happens when the rules become not the rules? What are the new rules? And why are there new rules here? Were these rules never really the rules? And it makes you stop and say, 1,000 years from now, if we're still here, are we going to have an entirely different concept of space and time and our presence in it? Have we been living? Have we been living? Oh, I know, but have we been living wrong this whole time? Remember when we said if you become an
energy being, your frame of reference and perspective. That's the same thing here. Is that if you start to understand that actions today can have a retroactive historical effect, you're going to have people who are going to be so paranoid about every single thing they do that they won't do anything.
Well, think about that. Yeah, it's like what have you perceived that has stated something, and it is now just what it is. You know, going back to like before Jesus Christ.
It is what it is. No, it isn't.
It is what it is forever from the point that you perceived it.
Sure.
But you're also dealing with the fact that everyone who has perceived it before you has set many of the parameters for you. So yeah, it's such a mind fuck when you really start getting into it. And I appreciate these.
They should call it perceptual weirdness, not quantum weirdness.
Well, because I think it's bigger than it's bigger than just our perceptions.
Well, yeah, but since everything is lens that we understand through our own perception of it, then that's how you.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no other way to explain it to a human being in terms other than what human beings can perceive.
Yeah, there's a great section here, right? So, conscious choices.
Yeah.
So for Penrose, this retroactive process helps explain how athletes make rapid decisions under extreme time constraints. Quote, I used to play a lot of ping pong. I think it's hilarious that he played a lot of ping pong. Says Penrose. Quote, if I suddenly decide I want to shoot the ball this way rather than that way, I consider I'm making that decision consciously. Now that's far less than half a second. The process of taking in sensory information, making a decision, and then acting is a relatively lengthy physiological process. Decisions that involve a rapid reaction time are thought to be made unconsciously. According to cognitive psychology and neuroscience, the sense afterward that we made a conscious choice is an illusion. Penrose could never swallow this explanation. Quote, your conscious internal experience might be a kind of quantum reality, offers Penrose. He suspects we may on some level be conscious of all the possible realities that get retroactively annihilated in under a second. This is not a science fiction book. This is an article about actual present-day scientific thought. It is so exciting and weird that, yes, I in the end, I felt I had to bring it to the table. Even though I don't fully even understand what's going on here, I'm still immensely turned on by it. And I think everybody, if you've even got a bit of curiosity about the nature of weirdness, you should check it out. And I do think that at some level, I mean, I tie this into other things. I do believe that at some point, when we start to understand some of these really weird, we'll call these quantum weirdness things, it will start to affect every bit of the supernatural that people believe in. Now, don't be wrong. Some supernatural shit, I think, is just people being scared. Or a hormonal chemical process in the body. But imagine if, seeing, people who see like a string of UFOs in the sky, right? Are you really seeing that? Or is that some kind of weird event that, it descends from some science that we just don't truly understand,
Sure.
Like this is the whole ocean space thing. So when I was a kid, it took me a while to realize that as fascinating as space was, the ocean was just as fascinating because it was such an inhospitable environment, right? And yet it was very funny that we knew more about space to some degree than we knew about the bottom of the ocean. When I was a kid. One is deeper into our own planet, and the other is the outer. And in many ways, our consciousness is kind of like that. There's everything that we understand that's kind of out. And then there's everything that's deep, deep inside. Like even on the scientific level, there's everything that you can see before you and the big spatial events. And then there's all the quantum mechanics, the smallest of the small, smaller than small could possibly be. And we know so little about that. And so I feel I'm having this moment in my 40s that I had when I was a little kid of saying, the small stuff is just as important as the big stuff. The small stuff might even be more mysterious and fascinating, and on some level affects us even more. Now, I also accept the fact that these are scientific theories, and it is so strange that we could be hilariously classically wrong. I mean, there are plenty of if you go back in time, there's plenty of weird theories about the nature of everything that were then proved to be absolutely nuts. I mean, just the concept of what the moon was, before telescopes. Like every advance in technology gives us a better sense of the universe that we live in, which then pushes us to create better technology because we realize there's so much more that we don't know. And we still don't know the things that we don't know. It's I am humming with the excitement of how weird it is and how infinite it makes reality feel. I'm not religious. I used to think I was an agnostic atheist, but I'm going to call it a soft atheist, because I accept the possibility that something could happen, but I lean towards the fact that there's nothing, right? But reading about stuff like this, it makes me feel like the universe is so weird that it goes beyond any concept you could have of how it is, why it is, what the hell is really going on. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. So everyone should read this article. I don't know if you'll understand it, but it messes with the nature of reality and just these ideas that just your perception. Like that whole thing. I've told you before, they did a study years ago about how tracking chemical processes in the brain, things become stimulated in your brain before you consciously make a decision. I remember you were really annoyed about this because you didn't like the idea that it almost made it feel like something else was making the decision for you. But that
Sure.
before you make a conscious decision, parts of your brain are already warming up as if the decision has already been made. And you're sitting there going, yeah, but I'm not making a decision for another couple milliseconds or whatever. Why is this happening before? And this idea that it's retroactive, this idea that on some level the decision echoes back down the timeline. You know what I mean? It's fascinating. I mean, what Penrose is essentially saying is that the brain is not fast enough, is not a fast enough engine to do the things that we require it to do to perceive reality and function the way we do. And if it isn't capable of that, or if it is capable of that, what is it doing that we can't see? What is the quantum process that is going on? And is there some level of, we always talk about how time is a concept. I know we are experiencing time, but have you ever stopped down and sit about the fact that just the very idea of moving through the universe in order, why is there even an order? This is the stuff that I can't think. Honestly, it's really good that we're doing this show early in the day, because it's this stuff that I get that if I think about this stuff late at night, it puts me in a loop and I'll never sleep, because it is so all-encompassing. Well, it's hard. It's hard to think about time while you are stuck in the process of time. It's like I've said this before, it's like trying to fix the engine of a car while you're doing 100 down the highway, right? We're in the stream of time, but it is such a weird concept when you stop and think about it. The beginning, the middle, the end. Why does it have to move that way? You know, what about reality says that it has to have a beginning, middle, and end? You know, and
well, I don't necessarily think it does.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
it's just that we have a need for time as an idea because it's the only explanation of why we start small.
Well, we have a narrative,
and then rot.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not. I don't know that experience is the same for corporeal creatures or non-carbon-based life forms.
Yeah, absolutely. And and for all we know, right, because the process seems to be almost individual, right? What's to say that when you die, you don't just do the whole thing in reverse?
Sure.
It's just that everybody's with you is on a different kind of,
I mean, I've never really had a problem with the reincarnation idea. I don't think you come back as a person.
I'm not talking about reincarnation. I'm saying you do the whole thing in reverse.
Well, but that could be, but that's not reincarnation. That could be the same thing. Reincarnation could be going backwards. It could be you devolving down into a fetus or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what that would look
exactly.
like.
No, but that's what's so great about this is that it could be fucking anything.
Maybe you're an energy fairy that goes around and sprinkles your intelligence to other beings until you're devoid of it, and then you turn into a fetus again.
Or you wake up and you find out the whole thing was a fabulous virtual reality multi game system from the year 2 billion, and that you took off time from being a tech god to live reality, quote unquote.
Yeah, why not?
Right? Wouldn't that? I mean, we've talked about this as well. So yeah, this article was so us on some level. So you should read it if you get a chance. I think you will enjoy it, and there will be concepts in there that'll make you go, I disagree with that.
It'll take me a while to read it.
Oh, it took me. I made the mistake of opening this article in bed the other morning, and thinking, "Oh, this looks like some light reading." And then I started reading it, and reading it. And I got about halfway through, and I was like, I have to stop this now because, the parts of my brain, there are parts of my brain that I try to keep quiet. And I try to keep them quiet because once they get going, like I said, these are the parts of my brain that really start to tear at the nature of reality and reasoning and being. And these are the parts that can make me non-functional as a day-to-day human being. And I am a parent, so I need to be available. So I have to keep these bits from getting out of control. I started watching. So my wife and I recently got HBO Max. Put it off forever. And I don't like to have too many channels open on like Amazon Prime. But recently we closed down our BritBox account because there's nothing we wanted to watch, and I was like, let's open HBO Max because So right now we just have HBO Max and Paramount Plus.
I'm getting ready. I've got a calendar item to cancel Netflix based on their next price. I'm like, I'm done with you. That's it.
Oh, there you go. And that's the thing. If you could do that for a while, I mean, they are basically like,
well, you can, again, as I've said many times, we get this idea that we have to have it running. No, you don't. You cancel it, reopen it, and watch whatever you want, and then close it again. Fine.
There you go, yeah. So we started watching HBO Max, and we were like trying to figure out what shows to watch. And of course, we picked stuff like Our Flag Means Death, because I was really curious about that show. And we started watching Newsroom with Jeff Daniels, which is pretty sure the guy who did The West Wing is doing an idealized show of a newsroom.
It's
it's so oh god, it's such like it's reality porn. It's the what if it was best case and everybody had high moral standards? And
that's I mean that's The West Wing too.
Exactly.
Yes, this is the perfect democratic vision of how to solve all the world's problems.
Exactly.
Because on that show they solved the Middle East crisis. Don't think that really happened in actual life.
In West Wing?
Yeah, they actually got them to agree to not fight over Jerusalem by becoming they put the United States in Jerusalem as a peacekeeping force. And that would never happen because
that would never fly. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So, it is a dream of
I know. It's
democratic
fantasy,
people thinking they can solve problems.
Yeah. So, but one of the shows that I never watched that I always wanted to watch was True Detectives with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, how is that? Because I've always been told watch the first season and don't watch anything else.
Okay,
I know there's a new one coming with Jodie Foster.
No. Every season is its own story. They're not connected.
Right. I knew that. That's why they said you could just watch the first one and be done with it.
Yeah, and every season basically connects as is a detective story with twists and turns. Now, I've only watched the first episode, right? And the reason I wanted to bring it up was because Matthew McConaughey does a phenomenal job of not being Matthew McConaughey in this. He is not the charming...
Hey, we're going to go down and solve a crime. It's going to be fun.
Near as I can tell, half the show he's an alcoholic because it's a time thing too. There's a part that takes place in the future and a part that takes place in the past, or the present and the past, right?
Yes, and of course, as you would expect, somebody has made the chronological version of it as a fan edit.
Oh, interesting. So Matthew McConaughey in the past, near as I can tell, he lost his daughter. I don't know how he lost her, but he lost his daughter. It destroyed his marriage, and he is a recovering alcoholic, except he is a nihilist. He is an utter nihilist, and he has this very sort of negative vision of reality. He basically, there's aspects of it that are very familiar to me. I'll put it like that. And there's a line in that show where like he walks out and he's with oh my God, what's his name from Cheers?
Woody Harrelson.
Woody Harrelson. He walks out with Woody. And
I was giving you a second to see if you'd come up with it.
No, I can't.
It's one of the Cheers characters whose actor name is the character name. So usually
he walks out. Yeah, he walks out with Woody, who they've only been working together for a short while at this point. They don't really know each other that well.
Oh man, what would that show look like if it was Woody from Cheers?
Oh, well, yeah. So, and Woody is in the show, he's a very straight-laced, like he's your normal vision of a cop, right? But they're in a really poor part of Louisiana, and they're walking out from the coroner's office, and there is this kind of dilapidated strip mall in the background, right? And Matthew McConaughey looks around and he says, yeah, he's like, do you ever get this sense when you look around that you're seeing like the memories of places, memories of small towns, and they're just slowly fading away around us? And Woody looks at him and he goes, don't say shit like that to me. He's like, let's just not talk. Right? And that's what I kind of like, is it's Woody makes the mistake of trying to like get to know McConaughey's character, and then when McConaughey opens his mouth, the shit that comes out just like disturbs him. And I mean, and he is this doomed nihilist character, which is why after watching the first episode, I get the sense that they think they caught a serial killer. They didn't catch the serial killer because there's a similar crime now, and now they're trying to either pin it on McConaughey in the present, or figure out why the right person wasn't caught the first time around. As near as I can tell, it's weird too because I read about this show and nobody ever spoiled it for me. Like I read about it and I think I just forgot about it. But
oh really? See, because I know how it ends, and it doesn't end how I wanted it to.
Yeah.
Not meaning the actual ending, but do you want me to not tell you since you've gone into this blind, or you don't care?
Oh no, I don't care. Come on, you
okay.
know that. I don't give
They
a
make
shit.
it out like there's a supernatural element, like a cult thing.
Oh no, I knew
isn't.
there was never a supernatural.
Yeah, see, to me that almost.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can tell me what you're talking about, but that almost killed the show's.
No, the show.
Appeal.
Here's the thing: the show is dripping with doom, right?
Well, but they're talking about the King in Yellow and this concept,
I know that. I know,
and it never actually
but
materializes.
The show is dripping with doom. But what I think the point is that we create the fantasies. We create the doom. Is that there doesn't need to be a supernatural element. It's bad enough without it.
You know what I mean? For me, it's like, I already knew that.
I know, and I think that's why a lot of it's such a strange thing for these characters. Whereas like Woody's character is supposed to be kind of like the run of the mill good cop. He's having an affair on his wife. But he's trying to put up this happy household, but he never sees his wife and his kids because he's always working, and it really starts to play with the roles of people and their identities. And so like I don't know if it'll hold up for me, but I really fucking enjoyed that first episode. It was I've
always read the first season is pretty bulletproof. I've many people who have said, it never gets back to that, have said the first season is exceptional, like Wire level.
I didn't think that there was a supernatural element to this show going into it. I never read that there wasn't, but even going in, I always knew that there was a psychosexual occult mindset to this, but it's
funny you bring that up for a review coming later, but go on. But I do remember when it was on, people thought that there was, because they were doing the King in Yellow stuff, and I just read that fairly close to that, some stories around that concept. So I was like, oh wow, this sounds great.
No, but that's the funny thing about People is that it doesn't take much to create this expectation of the mystical and the occult. But then in the reality, you realize, no, it's just people. You don't need Cthulhu because people are bad enough.
I get that, but I've realized in the last 5 or 6 years I have a real taste for kind of folk horror, for that cult.
No, absolutely. Listen,
not.
You know what? I said to you that watching Newsroom is like a political fantasy, right? We love fantasy, and the thing is, what I think we love most about fantasy, at least I do, like actual fantasy novels. I love fantasy novels because it always goes back to the fact that by killing one person, you can save a kingdom. Kill the evil wizard, and you can save the kingdom. Kill the evil,
simplified solutions to giant problems.
It makes it so that it's not an endemic aspect of human existence. You make it so it's something that you can kill off. You can make everything better if you kill the magic killer. You can make everything better if you let Candyman take care of the cops, right? Like, there's all these things, and you realize, no, these are our yearnings. These are our desires. This is what we wish was there. Because if, and this goes back to a thing I always tell my kids, whereas to this day, if my kids have a nightmare or if they get an irrational fear of something, right, and they come to me, I always say, like, scared of something in the dark. I thought I heard a noise, or yada yada. I always say, hey, if monsters exist, right, what does that mean? And they're like, if monsters exist, then Daddy has the magic hammer. And I'm like, right, because I have a big gold magic hammer that they know is from, Beta Ray Bill. That is Beta Ray Bill's hammer, right? They know it's a magical hammer. And when they were little, when they believe in these kind of things, I always told them it was a magic hammer. But as they got older, I said to them, I was like, if monsters exist, then the hammer is magical. And if the hammer is magical, then Daddy will destroy all the monsters because Daddy will have a magic hammer and he's fucking angry. I was like, or there are no monsters and Daddy still has a hammer. So you don't have to worry about whatever it is going bump in the night because one way or the other, Daddy will deal with it. That's my philosophy with these things, right? If there's a monster, magic hammer will hurt. If it's not a monster, a hammer will hurt. And that's, it works for now. But I had no idea that there was ever supposed to be a mystical element. I always figured it was like a ritual, psychological killing, But going back to the nihilism, it's that's one of the things that has stood out to me is the level of nihilism that they have given Matthew McConaughey's character and how.
Well, that is the part that still appeals to me.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, it is the stuff that comes out of his mouth. I mean, his character is. You are. I am more worried about what his character is going to do, more than anything else, and not even like, oh, he's going to kill someone. No, like just how he is going to disturb people, and his reactions. And he doesn't. And the thing is, I do feel for the character because he doesn't get along with anybody. Like he is at one point, their captain is asking Woody about McConaughey's character as a detective, and Woody Harrelson's like, well, he's a good detective. He's like, he doesn't get along with anybody, and I wouldn't have him handle a press conference or anything like that. He's like, but he's a good detective. And it's that kind of idea is that, they need him for what he's capable of. And in that respect, it's very Sherlock Holmes, right? I mean, not that he is Sherlock Holmes, but he is very good at being a detective. But everything else about his life is broken and destroyed, and his vision of reality is so pessimistic that, it's he doesn't kill himself because what is the point? Right? There's no hope in his life. And he doesn't think there's going to be any hope if he kills himself. So why bother? And then he's kind of fighting to do something.
There's nothing waiting after.
Right. What's the point? Yeah. So I'm enjoying it, but yeah, it's that nihilism, that pessimism, that I can have a very nihilistic view or a very pessimistic view of the nature of reality. So, getting back to my article, this kind of science stuff gives me a lot of hope where normally I don't have any, because it shows me how weird the universe can really be, and that there may be a lot more to it than just this kind of basic meat level that we feel between our fingertips. You know what I mean? This idea that your reality, your brain is retroactively establishing reality across time, and that we're all doing it, and it goes back to that whole groupthink idea where people change when they're in massive groups. Yeah, because I think that many people perceiving of a thing can maybe change the nature of reality itself. Maybe a rally does more than we think it does. Maybe if you get enough people to believe in a thing, you can make that thing real, whether you realize it or not on some level. So, in a good way and a bad way, I mean, yeah. So that's all I got, which is hilarious because I thought that I didn't have anything to talk about, and then now we're at the 50-minute mark.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I don't care.
So what do you have for me, Mr. Wizard?
So, as you mentioned, psychosexual. Criterion Channel comes through once again. I was looking through their. I'm trying to remember which collection this is part of. I'm pulling it up now. I should have done this right before I started talking because I don't plan well. But let me see. This is part of their collections. What is their collection this time? I don't remember which one this is part of. Oh, come on. Can I not even just see the damn... This is one thing I don't like about Criterion is a lot of things... Okay, no, I was going to say, are you going to have to make me log in just to see it? I believe this is part of 90s horror... Yeah, no, wrong. I was incorrect. Hold on, there's a lot of horror stuff. Art house horror? Is it art? It must be. Yes, it is part of the Art House Horror collection. It's a movie, and I was looking through these, and a lot of these, I've probably seen half of these. So a lot of them I'm familiar with, which is not a surprise. This is, by the way, a wonderful collection of movies for anybody in terms of if you want to see some weird stuff and just some classic stuff. But, okay, let me count here. So of the 6 times 4 is 24. It's 26 films. Of the 26, 1, 2, 3, 4. Face of Another is one of them, by the way. 5, 6, 7. These movies are so... 8, 9, 10, 11, now 12 with that one. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So 17 of the 26 I've seen. So I have not seen 9 of them. So I've seen a lot of these. But one of the ones that I hadn't seen is a film from 1978 called The Shout. And I basically the way I look at these is, number one, I look at whatever the thumbnail image is. And in this particular, it's just a guy screaming at the sky, which is okay. That might be nothing. It might be something. It was. Does
this movie have John Hurt and Tim Curry?
Yes.
Yeah. No way.
Well, whoa. All right. Dial back the Tim Curry expectations. He's barely in it. His part is important, but it's basically a bookend part, beginning end.
Okay.
He's not. Yeah. So, but John Hurt is really in it. So really, there's 3 primary people. Alan Bates.
You've got some good actors in this.
Oh no. There are great actors in this. Let's make sure we clarify. I'm just saying that Tim Curry, while extraordinarily skinny and young, is only at the very beginning and the very end. So don't expect to see a lot of him. I actually
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Is this description correct?
Go ahead. Give it to me.
A traveler by the name of Crossley forces himself upon a musician and his wife in a lonely part of Devon and uses the aboriginal magic he has learned to displace his host.
That is technically Correct.
Okay.
And the reason I say technically is there is a huge way to interpret this movie once you get to the end of it. And in fact, a lot of people have interpreted it in different ways. Now, I immediately connected this to The Last Wave. This feels like an analog to that film, which is also a movie that movie takes place in Australia and is directly with Aboriginal, but the Aboriginal element and the way this is dreamy and the way it uses kind of surrealistic things.
I just realized that the Alan Bates is Claudius from the Mel Gibson Hamlet.
Yes. Oh, he is really intense in this movie. Yeah, he's good. Yeah. So, essentially this is a relatively simple film. So John Hurt and Susanna York play a married couple that live in, what did they say, Devon? Yeah, basically a town by the ocean, a very, very, very British town by the ocean. I mean, so British that you could basically have your accent changed just by watching this film. It feels so alien to an American experience.
I'm going to tell you a little secret, man. They're all very British. All those little towns are very British.
No. This one, if you were to watch this is so old-timey British. It's insane how far it is.
I'm telling you, having visited a lot of those little towns, when I did like a tour with my wife and her family, they are all something out of a little British, yes.
This one feels like a parody at times. I'll say it like that. It is such an extreme on that idea. I mean, I know that that Britain has a lot of these non-London, non-city areas that are very kind of country, and I understand that. I get that. But this is maxed out, where it's one house in the middle of just rolling hills on the ocean, with it's an extreme version of it to me. Now, maybe people who live in Britain will say, no, that's pretty normal. And plus it's the 70s. So it's also the time period. It's not just where it is, it's when it is, because there's no phones. And it's just a completely different era of this. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so that actor Alan Bates, I remember him because he did the movie Women in Love with Oliver Reed.
Oh, Oliver Reed, another intense actor.
Hold on. Have you ever seen Women in Love?
Yeah, but a long time ago. I only remember maybe parts of it.
My mother always went on about this movie because there is a scene where Alan Bates and Oliver Reed wrestle nude.
Yes, that is one of the parts I remember.
And apparently it is burned into her memory. So,
well, it is like the Viggo Mortensen fight scene from History of Violence.
Oliver Reed could so be the Viggo Mortensen of that time.
If you ever watch The Devils, you will understand why women would turn on God for him. He is amazing in that film. Even I wanted to crawl through the screen. I mean, he's such the macho man of the club. It's so crazy how sexual that movie is. I mean, it's overtly sexual, and it's what's the opposite? Overtly
and subvertly.
Covertly. I was going to say covert, whatever it is. Yeah, it's definitely a movie of two types. But anyway,
got it.
Back to the
Go
shout.
on.
So the shout is Susanna York, John Hurt live in this little house in this little town. John Hurt is an electronic experimental musician, and I do love this thing. This movie is such a Snedeker should watch this. The sound design, the way the music is used. They got two of the people who were in Genesis back when Genesis was more of a experimental band, when Peter Gabriel was still around, and they did the score, and the score is just, I have to buy it. It's so fantastic. It reminds me of Stalker. It's this wonderful, organic, atmospheric, very minimal score that kind of just wafts around you and goes through you and around you. It's very, very interesting. And so he does, and there's multiple parts where he is recording things with his microphone. The sound is very loud and it's very upfront and in your face because he's recording kind of field recordings where he's getting he puts a bee in a jar and sticks the microphone in there. You hear this very loud buzzing. And that then becomes this thing that you hear through the movie when Alan Bates' character is kind of preying on the wife. There's all this stuff like that they do through the whole movie. But essentially he is, so the movie starts off. We start off, and it's Tim Curry, and I can't remember the actor's name, but it's basically they're working
a very young Tim Curry too.
Yes, young and thin. That's why I'm saying is, yeah. So he knows I believe the head doctor of a psychiatric ward somewhere in England, where Tim Curry is showing up. He's also a doctor to help out with a staff versus inmates game of cricket. This movie is so British, indeed, it becomes a parody. So they're playing, and this is bizarre to me on its face, that they're letting people with mental problems, including one who is known to throw the ball, whatever the ball in cricket is called. He's known to throw it at people's heads. And that's not a ball. Like, baseballs can kill you if you get thrown at your head. That thing is like solid, I assume wood or some kind of material. You could easily kill somebody by throwing it at them. And they're letting this person pitch, which is, and they're not wearing helmets, by the way. In cricket, I don't know about today, but in the 70s, no helmets. They had like floppy hats. That's it. They made sure they covered up their legs and their balls, but they don't cover up their heads, even though this thing is being thrown at you, which is bizarre. But again, what do I know? The 70s were a different time. So that's how it starts off. And Tim Curry is going to be keeping score for the staff, and he is put into a scoring box, which is this wooden box they wheel out. And in that box is Alan Bates, and he is going to be keeping score for the inmates. And immediately, Alan Bates looks like a psychopath. I mean, he's got this expression, and when you're really good at making expressions with your face, it's an expression that looks like he could just burn a building down by looking at it. Like, he's got this intensity to him. So right away, it's very clear this whole movie is anchored around him, which it is. And so he sits there, Tim Curry, and the doctor says, you're going to be scoring with Crossley. You know, he's brilliant. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met, you know, but he can be a little bit intense. So, you know, just be aware of that. And Tim Curry was like, okay, well, I can handle intense. I mean, I was Frankenfurter, but, you know, he doesn't say that. But so he sits down and they're sitting there. And then Crossley proceeds to tell him, no. So as this is happening, there's a part, I believe this clip starts off, or it's right at the beginning, where he says, there you are. And when he says, there you are, what he's doing is he's been watching the field, and John Hurt walks out as he says this. So I'm going to play this clip.
There you are.
Sorry, did you say something?
That man had a wife who loved him. A rare phenomenon, wouldn't you say?
Dad. Well, what happened to her?
He lost her. I could tell you the rest of the story if you like. Do you think you can listen and score at the same time?
I'm sure I can.
We could make things easier for ourselves. You could keep both scores, and I could tell the story, and at the fall of each wicket, I could copy down what you've written.
Very well organized, Mr. Crossley.
Every word of what I'm going to tell you is true. Only I'm telling it in a different way. It's always the same story. It's always the same story, but I change the sequence of events, and I vary the climax a little, because I like to keep it alive. You see, I like to keep it alive.
So immediately this sets up that we can't rely on anything this character is telling us.
Yeah,
that's the unreliable
narrator.
Yeah. Right off the bat. So that's the immediate setup, and then we shift backwards in time. And I forgot, the very, very beginning of the film is this thing where you see this, what we find out later is supposed to be an Aboriginal individual, an Australian Aboriginal person, wandering around the sand dunes wearing nothing but a loincloth and a long captain's like tailor coat with the tails on it, like something from a naval battle, you know, where they have those long coats, like they're up on the top of the ship. Oh, hark, go forth, whatever. Right. So we see that. And then we get to this thing where they're scoring the thing. And then when he says, I'm going to tell you a story, we shift to somewhere else, to this little town where John Hurt and Susanna York live there. He's, again, a musician, and they're married. And we see him, John Hurt is he's working in his studio, and Susanna York comes in and says, oh, you're going to be late. You have to get to the church. You're going to be late. And he says, oh, I forgot. And races to the church, and we find out that he's the organist for the local church. So he's sitting there and he's playing as they're singing, you know, he's playing the background stuff. And there's a woman sitting in the back of the church. And the woman keeps looking at him in a let's go have sex type of way. And he's looking back at her, and he's kind of like nodding and smiling. And then she leaves the church. And then he's still playing the organ after she leaves. And we see her run off. And then the next thing we see is Alan Bates or Crossley. I'll just call him Crossley. What do I call him? I'll call him Crossley. Crossley comes out and he lets the air out of John Hurt's bike tire. What is John Hurt's name? If I'm going to call one by the actor name, I should call the other one.
It's either Bates and Hurt.
I'm just going to use the name because I don't remember their names. Because honestly, the names don't even matter. All you have to know is Bates York, Hurt, and Bates. So Bates lets the air out of Hurt's tire. Hertz comes out and is reinflating his tire, and Bates is just sitting there and says, "Oh, I've been walking for a long time," and he's asking him about the town and all this stuff. And John Hurt is kind of just looking at him like, "Okay, you're a bit of a weirdo," but he's like, "Do you mind if I walk with you?" And John Hurt's like, "No, I'm sorry, I'm late to go meet my wife," and bikes off. And then the next thing we see is John Hurt and the woman is on the back of his bike, and they're kind of riding around the countryside laughing. It's like, okay. They don't ever have sex that we see, but they're just kind of, there's something going on. You're made to think that he is probably either on his way to being unfaithful, or this is, even though later there is explicit full frontal nudity. So I don't think it's that they were shying away from it. I don't know what exactly we're supposed to infer from that. So I would think that this is the beginning of what will become an affair between Hurt and this woman. And she'll show up a couple of times in the movie, so it's not just a one-off scene. So then he goes home to his wife, and they're kind of eating, and they seem relatively happy, but not in bliss. Let's say they've been married probably for a little while, and maybe there's some little things going on, just little things that seem little moments of tension. Nothing that seems abnormal, but definitely indicating that it isn't. Oh, we are each other's sunrise and sunset.
They seem like they've been married for a while.
They seem like a fairly typical married couple, which is, ups and downs, swings and roundabouts, whatever. So then Hurt goes, where does he go? He goes someplace, and when he comes back, Bates is sitting outside of, and this is a very British thing, or at least I don't know a lot of American homes that have this, where the house then has a wall outside of its entrance with a little door on it. So he's sitting there, but I've seen that in British housing before.
It's a walled garden.
Oh yeah, he does mention the garden. I guess that is what it is. Yeah, okay. But it looks like a fortress wall. I mean, it's a big wall.
It is. A lot of them have these walled off gardens because the idea was it creates your little microcosm.
Well, boy, would I love to have that for my house. I love that idea of a wall. But anyway, so Alan Bates is just sitting there, and John Hurt comes up and he's kind of looking at him. Like,
what's his name? Oh God, no, because he reminded me now of this. William Blake. The poet. William. Yeah. William Blake used to sit nude with his wife in his back garden.
Good for him.
And he was known because at one point soldiers peeked in, saw his wife naked, started making commentary, and William Blake went out and punched one of them butt naked.
Good for him. Awesome.
There's a
so
fun
that's
story about William Blake. Yeah, go on.
So Bates is sitting there, and Hurt's looking at him. He says, "Are you all right?" And because Bates looks like he's passed out almost, and Bates says, "Oh, I've been on a walking journey for 2 days, and I really haven't eaten." And Hurt's like, "Oh, well, that's a shame." And Bates says, "Do you mind if I invite myself in for lunch? Here's something that would never happen if I'm on that fucking bike. Let's put it that way." And Hurt is like, "Well, I guess so." I'd be like, "Get the fuck out of here." But I guess maybe this is a 70s British thing or a 70s thing in general where some stranger can invite themselves in for lunch and you're okay with it.
Or maybe he's so afraid of having an altercation that he just lets it happen.
That's not how it seemed. It just seemed, maybe it's supposed to be that Hurt as the experimental weird artist is a free spirit and just like goes with the flow. I don't know. Whatever. They don't make a big thing of it because honestly, he could have just gone in, shut the door, and Bates wouldn't have been able to do anything because it wasn't like he was standing up. He was sitting on the ground, almost like lethargic. But anyway, he comes in, and this is again where we get a little type of thing where he comes in and he tells his wife, he's like, we're going to have a guest for lunch. And she says, "When did you invite him?" And he says, he kind of invited himself. And she looks a little bit annoyed. And then Bates comes in and he says, "I hope I'm not imposing." And the wife says, "No, my husband is just one of those people who just expects people to be able to be served, even if you don't plan for it." And I'm like, okay, yeah, they're seeding the little kind of, little tiny needles back and forth, whatever. So they're sitting there and they're eating whatever it is they eat for lunch. And we get some really fascinating stuff from Bates where he tells basically 2 parts of a story. So here's the first part.
Please. Must be hungrier than that if you haven't eaten for 2 days.
You must be starving.
I've been without food for much longer than 2 days.
Recently?
No, not recently.
But why?
I was traveling in the Australian outback. Food there was often in short supply.
How long were you living out there?
18 years, and in all that time, I never saw a white man.
18 years? Well, did you have an Aboriginal wife?
Yes, I did.
Children?
No. No children. None that survived, anyway. Under their law, either parent has the right to kill their offspring within a few weeks of birth. Always, I chose to exercise that right. I killed them because I knew that one day I would leave, and I knew that when I left, I would want to leave nothing behind. Does that shock you? That I admit to the killing of my children?
Right, so that sound you heard is as he's telling them that he's killed every child he ever had, which apparently is legal in the Aboriginal Australian outback at that time, he's doing the thing where he's putting his finger along the glass and making that noise. Now, I tamped that way down.
Yeah, because that is strong as it is.
I pushed that down by, I believe, 15 decibels from what the movie has it. Wow. Which is, if you know how decibels are, it's a lot. Because it builds up, and then at the end, he kind of runs his finger off it, and then you hear the glass shatter. And it's her glass, her wine glass. And when he does that, and then he says the thing about the children, he says, does that shock you? Then there's this long kind of moment where John Hurt says something, or no, he says something about, well, you know, we've never been able to have children. And the wife gets very upset and leaves, and they're kind of sitting there. And Bates, you know, and I'm jumping over all this because really you don't hear anything. You just see these kind of very specific stares, and like the wife leaves the room and is upset. And then Bates says this.
Killing of one's children is the only natural death in Aboriginal society. They believe that every other death is the result of either violence or some malevolent sorcery.
Sorcery, yes, well, I've heard of the pointing bone that they used to kill with.
Yes, that's the most common type of death magic.
Is it effective?
I've seen a man die within 3 days of learning that the bone has been pointing at him.
And who pointed the bone?
A magician he had wronged. Such a man could creep up behind you as you lay asleep, dip his hands into the small of your back, remove your kidneys, peel off the fat that surrounds them, and replace them without a scar. Death would be sure to follow in 2 or 3 days.
Interesting idea.
Once there was no rain for a whole year. The chief magician had been sent for. He was a genuinely terrifying figure, often parading in an old 18th century naval type officer's tailcoat.
So that tailcoat references the very beginning of the movie where we see the person wandering around. And John Hurt and his wife had a shared dream where they saw that figure. So when he says that, he reacts very, like he looks up like shocked because he mentioned this particular type of person. Because he'd already mentioned that he had seen no white people while he was in Australia. Therefore, the figure had to be black, which is what we see at the beginning, and is wearing this very specific coat that he mentions. So that to John Hurt is disturbing because that's the dream he and his wife had. When they had this dream, and this was earlier on, they were just kind of laying on the sand, you know, near the ocean, and they were dreaming this thing together. And they're both disturbed by it, but it doesn't really, nothing else really happens. They don't really talk about it, even though they both had a shared dream, and they know they did, but they don't seem to think that's remarkable. So I don't know what to make of that, but they don't seem to think there's anything special about that. So either that happens all the time to them, or British people are used to having shared dreams. I don't know, one or the other. So when that happened, and they were leaving, the wife had lost a buckle off of her shoe, right? And we see that Bates has that buckle. And that buckle becomes what seems like his ability to make her do whatever he wants. But also in that conversation, the whole thing is this movie has a lot of long sequences, which are great, but not for audio. So I didn't capture everything. And I even cut that one way down. That was probably twice as long as it was. But I cut out all this space where they're just kind of looking at each other and he's cutting food on the plate and all that stuff. So he says, Bates tells Hurt, that person taught me the concept of the death shout, where if I scream, I can kill anything within audio range of that scream. And John Hurt says, interesting. I'm a musician and I like to capture sounds. I'd like to hear that scream. And Bates says, if you hear it, then you'll die. And John Hurt basically says, yeah, I don't really believe that. And so Bates is like, okay. He's like, I suggest that you bring cotton or wax to put in your ears, but if you really want to hear it, then tomorrow we'll walk out on the dunes and I will show you the scream. Or not show you, but I will do the scream for you. So Hurt's like, okay. And there's a whole part where when Hurt walks in just before that. Oh, and Bates tells this story about, and we had seen, by the way, in the opening scene with him and Tim Curry, he has a bone that's like a sharpened bone. So that references the whole pointing bone thing that he's telling in the story. We see one of those where he's in the box with Curry. So we don't know what it is at that point, and we don't know what he's going to use it for, but we know he has one of those in the present or whatever when they're doing the scoring of the game. But even he says, I tell the story in different order. So we don't really even know what time frame anything is. There's a lot of dreaminess to this whole movie where it's like, it's not really cemented anywhere. And that partially is because this is a person telling a story. So that's partially because when people tell stories, they don't necessarily say, it was August 17th in 7 a.m. and I was here at the longitude of this and this, and it was raining, but only a light rain, and I could see down the street, but only about 2 miles because the visibility was bad. So there's all these details that when people tell stories, they leave out. And those are left out in here because he's telling stories. So we have not time jumps, we have scene jumps. We're not really sure sometimes how much time has passed, if this is something that's being remembered or not. There's a lot of that kind of vagueness, which is what I like. So he says, when he said that thing about it hadn't rained, when I stopped the clip, he then goes on to say that the way that the magician brought the rain was that he sliced his stomach across, pulled the skin of his stomach up over his body, and then I think did some kind of ritual thing with his muscles or whatever, and then it immediately started to rain. So he's basically telling John Hurt that I'm not just telling you that I've heard of these stories, I've seen these things happen. And then he tells him about the death shout. And Hurt says, yeah, I want to hear that. So then he goes up to get him the next morning, and Alan Bates is sitting in his bed, stark naked, just staring out the window when John Hurt walks in. And he says, no, come in. I don't care. Which, of course, John Hurt's very put off by that because I guess he's scared of penises or just not used to a nude stranger in his house or whatever. And so he comes in, and as he's talking to him, at one point he stands up, and we see that he has a scar going across his stomach, which the camera very clearly shows us, and John Hurt notices, which then lines up with the story about the magician, right? So that's clearly a story that he told, and he's got this scar. So what does that mean? We don't know yet. So then they go out in the dunes, and they're walking along, and Alan Bates is having no problem taking a very long walk up all this different terrain. John Hurt's almost falling over, and at one point he's like, I have to stop and rest, and Bates is just like, whatever, and keeps walking. And so he catches up to him, and he says, okay, now I'm going to scream. I suggest you cover your ears. Now, what he didn't notice was that even though John Hurt kept insisting that he didn't believe in the death shout, that he thought this was all superstition, all magic, he did in fact bring wax with him, and he had put it into his ears while Bates' back was turned to him. So Bates turns around.
Okay, go on.
Screams, right?
Yeah.
And we see a local shepherd and a bunch of sheep fall over dead. John Hurt is affected but does not die. He falls down, and he's got this almost like he's got a piercing headache and falls down. Okay? So then Bates finishes screaming and starts walking off as if nothing happened and walks by the shepherd and the dead sheep, and John Hurt is kind of stumbling after him. Now, importantly, I think, for later in the film, John Hurt doesn't see the sheep or the shepherd. They're behind the wall of a dune. So we see them. And I don't think Bates even looks at them, but they basically fall, they're if you don't go over the hill and look down, you wouldn't see them. So John Hurt walks by them. We see him on the other side of the hill, and we see the bodies, but nobody sees them. John Hurt, most importantly, does not see those bodies, so does not know that this person is dead. So then they go back to the house, and John Hurt is screwed up from the scream or whatever, And he goes up and lays in bed, and Alan Bates is downstairs with the wife. And now we start getting this thing where Bates is basically, starts saying lots of very veiled things like, I thought I might help you in the garden. And the wife says, with what? And he's like, well, with anything that you need any help with, any tasks that are beyond your ability to solve. Like, hey, do you want to get down or what? Like, it's very, very clear what's going on here. So they're outside, and they're sitting there, and they're just looking at each other with what, is very, very loaded stares of how fast can we get undressed and just start fucking in the garden type of stuff. And John Hurt looks out and sees him and comes downstairs. And earlier, when Bates first showed up, the wife said, when is he leaving? And I don't like him. That was the first thing she says is, I don't like him. Or, when is he leaving? I don't care for him. At this point now, she's happy to be around with him. And Hurt notices that Bates is like very suggestively fingering the buckle in his hand, but not where she can see it, only where he can see it. And so she says, could you maybe run into town and get my shoe fixed because the buckle broke? And Hurt's like, sure, and kind of pulls her aside, and he says, he's got your buckle, right? And she's like, so what? Maybe he likes it. Maybe he wants to keep it. And Hurt's like, right? And
that
so
phrase,
Hurt's like,
that is so telling. That little, okay.
Little stuff like that. There's all this little stuff where clearly now she doesn't not only does she not like him, she's digging him. So
buckle,
she's basically, and like Hurt says something about, I don't know if I'm going to go far enough into town to get the shoe fixed. And she says, well, just do it for me. And she shoves him and knocks him down. Like, get the fuck out of here. And so, like it's like, okay, somebody's down to clown and you need to get fucking lost. So he runs and he starts running because he clearly kind of knows what's going on. So you see him running, and then we get this whole scene where in John Hurt's music studio, there's all these weird images like Francis Bacon stuff. And there's a particular black and white image of this. It's a famous image. I can't remember the name of it. It's like girl crawling backwards or something. And it's black and white. It's this very disturbing image of a woman like bent backwards, crawling almost Exorcist style. And at one point, Susanna York kind of imitates that when she strips completely nude and is just like prancing around the room waiting for Bates. And then he walks in only wearing his coat, and like they just start going at it with each other as Hurt is in town. And then he comes back. Oh, but when he's in town, there was this moment where when he was on the sand dunes, he kind of he blacked out. He came back to, and he was holding a stone. And as he was holding the stone, he was talking as the town cobbler about how to mend a shoe. And then when he dropped the stone, it kind of went away from him. So when he's in the store, the cobbler's telling him about this weird dream he had where it felt like somebody was gripping him by the kidneys. And the stone that John Hurt was holding was kidney shaped. And he says, and it was as if we were in each other's minds, that we were seeing each other, and then it just suddenly stopped. And we see a flashback to Hurt dropping the rock, and then the guy falls out of his bed. So there's some kind of psychic thing with rocks in the sand dunes now. And then right as he says that, the door opens and a woman comes out, and it's the woman from the church, and she's the cobbler's wife. And John Hurt's like, I got to get home now, and splits with the shoe. So he goes back, walks in the house, right?
What's funny is that there's a weird morality here, isn't there? Like,
oh boy, is there? Yeah,
because
like
really on one hand, this makes me think of that. I was talking about the whole True Detective thing, where I was talking about how Matthew McConaughey is he's not charming, he's not nice, like he's very kind of like he's almost disturbing to people, and yet Woody Harrelson is the one that morally is kind of on the lower ground because he's he has a wife and kids, and he goes on how good it is to have wife and kids, and yet he's the one that's cheating on his wife. You know what I mean? So it's like in this respect, yes, the magic man is having sex with your wife, but you were already having sex with somebody else's wife.
It sure seems like something. We never see that. We never actually see that, but something was going on. Clearly, there's something going on there, or will be something. Like he was either already there or on the road to having an affair. No doubt about it. So he comes in the house, and Alan Bates is sitting there, and the wife is kneeling next to him, like with her head on his hands. And Hertz comes in, and somehow that alone doesn't tip him off that something's wrong. But Bates is like, he says, you know what? We're going to finish eating here, and then we're going to go up and get into bed. So maybe you should get lost. And John Hurt's like, what? And he's like, you heard me. Get the fuck out of here or I will kill you. And John Hurt, like it's this, and I'm skipping over lots of stuff because this movie has lots of just long scenes of weird stuff. Not weird, but like very intense, just looking at each other, that type of stuff, that, you know, that type of thing happening. And so, what, you know, he says, you know, he's like talking to his wife, and the wife, he says to the wife, he's like, what is he talking about? And she goes, you heard him. And that's all she says to him. Right? So John Hurt runs out of the house, right? And then we see him running to the sand dunes, and he says to himself, if the cobbler was there, then Bates has to be there, meaning that there's a rock that's him. So we see him on the sand, and he's looking through all this sand and through the rocks, and he keeps picking ones up. He's like, and I don't know how he knows which one is which. I really have no idea how we were supposed to discern it. But
he's just trying to feel it.
He's divining it, sure. So he's finding all these rocks, Meanwhile, the wife and Bates are in bed, right? And they're just having a wild old fuck time. And then he finds the Bates rock. And when he does that, Bates immediately just kind of like reacts, like he snaps up. And he says, somebody's trying to kill me. And you hear their dog barking from outside, but the bark is weird. Like you don't know there's something wrong with it. Not meaning wrong as in the dog's in pain, but the bark doesn't sound right for some reason. And so then Bates just flips out and he says, get out there. He's like, get out there and stop them. Whoever's trying to kill me, tell them if they come near me, I'll kill them. I'll shout at them. But he's lost, in the whole movie, he's been completely composed and in control. But now that Hurt has his spirit rock, he has lost all control. Like he's now terrified. So he's kicking the wife. She's naked in the sheets. Like, get the fuck out there and tell them to stop or I'll kill them. Like he's just going crazy. And then Hurt takes off his shoes. He puts the rock on one shoe and he starts wailing on the rock. And Bates starts like having seizures and falling over and screaming in pain. And he falls down the stairs. And so then the wife goes outside. She goes outside the little garden wall. And we hear the bark, and then it becomes a police officer, as if the police officer was imitating a dog's bark perfectly. I don't know what to make of that, because the dog's nowhere to be found. The dog is around, but that wasn't the dog. And so there's two police officers.
Maybe the dog barking was a metaphor.
Well, we're going to get to that. Oh, by the way, throughout the movie, we have interspersed images of that cricket match. So we occasionally cut back and forth as he's telling the story, but most of it is the flashbacks. Those are really quick little scenes, but they may be important when I get to the end. So the one officer then goes into the walled garden, and we get this sequence, which I'll play.
Charles Crossley, I have a warrant for your arrest for the murder of your children.
No bloody fools! I'll shoot you dead!
That was his shout, but just ring it.
That's what a shout is like! Only 1,000 times worse! It's true. Every word I'm telling you is true. I was Crossley. I was.
So that then cuts to the cricket match.
Was that him yelling the lightning blast?
Yeah, okay, so it's him shouting that then turns into a plane flying overhead as a thunderstorm happens. Right? Now, whenever he shouted before, we never heard the plane, but we very significantly hear his shout turn into an airplane engine sound at this point, as we're now at the end of the movie. So this is where they've arrested him, and now we cut back to the cricket match, and basically he's going crazy, as he was in the story, inside the cricket hut. Tim Curry runs out. He splits because he's like, this dude has lost it. And they come in and they're trying, the head doctor comes in, and one of the inmates is, because now that it's pouring rain, so the inmate is trying to push the cricket box back inside where it came from, because obviously the cricket match has been canceled because there's a thunderstorm and everybody's just, getting soaked. And as he's doing that, Crossley says, I can still do the shout. I'm going to do it. And he starts yelling. He says, if you don't let me go, I'm going to shout. And he shouts. And as he does that, the hut explodes into flames. It kills him, the doctor, and the guy pushing the hut. right? And so the very end of the movie is York, the wife, shows up, and she is a nurse at this facility. And she comes in and she says, "Where is he? Where is he?" And one of the other nurses says, "He's in there." And she goes in and uncovers the body and sees his face, and it fades to black, right? And then that's the end of the movie. Now, once it got to that point and I started thinking about the movie, I thought, okay, Can I
add something?
Oh, go for it. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I know that it's very interesting that you brought an Aboriginal movie. A movie that deals with Aboriginal magic to the mix. Because I know that the Aboriginal vision of time is very different.
Yes. That's why when you were talking about the stuff earlier, I'm like, oh, this is going to come back later. They
have that whole concept of the dreaming. And
dream walking or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. So
walkabout, that's what it's called.
Yeah, so that the fact that everything gets so weird at the end and that the whole thing is encapsulated or is kind of bookended with a story, it's kind of like, it makes sense that it would be this sort of their attempt at using an Aboriginal, I guess, theme to their very British movie. So please tell me, what is your take?
Well, here is the other problem with me recanting this movie and not having visuals to go with it. When I said that they kept cutting back to the cricket match, the interesting thing is I started thinking about the cutbacks. And the fact that he starts out saying, "I'm going to tell you a story," and I mix and match it. And so I kind of went back and rewatched certain segments. And what I noticed is none of this happened to me. None of it. This is all him making it up based on the people that are there. Because when John Hurt is there, John Hurt shows no signs of having a wife, of being in any type of distress, anything. Because this is supposedly, it's not, John Hurt doesn't look vastly younger or older, where you would imagine that a lot of time has passed. Alan Bates looks virtually identical to when he's telling the story. So it doesn't seem like a lot of time has passed, or he has managed not to shave in exactly the same way, which is fascinating. You know what I mean? And when John Hurt is waiting to bat for his cricket thing, there's an inmate woman who keeps looking at him in ways that look very much like the church woman was looking at him. And the thing is that Bates said he had a wife. We don't find out what happened to her, and killed the kids, and he was arrested for murder, and we don't know, lost the wife. We don't know what that means. And clearly, when Susanna York shows up at the end, John Hurt's not there. She's a worker at the facility where Alan Bates is an inmate. So all of this to me is that he is basically, it's like a Kaiser Soze thing where he's putting all the pieces of this story together from what he sees. Well, who knows? Because he's crazy. He's in an insane asylum. So, there was a part, I didn't clip it, where he talks about how the fact that he tells these fantastical stories to the head doctor to amuse him. But they're like, so maybe that was the clue. I should have clipped that, because that might explain it then. That might be why he does it. He just tells tall tales. But the other thing is when he shouts and the place bursts into flames, when I looked at it again, it looked like a lightning strike. And so the idea that he shouts and it's a plane, he says, oh, it sounds just like that, but much louder. And then that also factors into when the sheep and the shepherd died. At one point, the local, the vicar or the priest of the church shows up and asks John Hurt to play at his funeral. And he says, oh, Harry died. And he's like, yeah, they found him on the dunes. No mention of the sheep, just that the shepherd died. So again, all these things feel like, did he know somebody died locally and he just read that the guy died and made up the sheep? All of it feels like it's fabricated to me. This is all a person who we know is an unreliable, unstable individual making up a story to, for what end, we don't know. Does an insane person need a normal reason to tell a tall tale? I don't know. But I love the movie. I thought it was great. And especially because I was thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, this, all the things he's saying all have analogs to this cricket match. And why else to keep cutting back to this cricket match and showing certain things that look like they are, if not necessarily direct references or direct imitations, but things that fit into his story as it goes along. Oh, and the fact that he has the pointing stick, and suddenly conveniently in his story, there's a pointing stick. And the scar is because there is no magician. He's making it up that he did it, and that he's magical. Did he ever live in the Aboriginal outback? I don't know. Maybe he did.
Hey, you know what? This ties back to the whole True Detective thing. A lot of people wanted it to be magical, and in reality, it was just, a crazy killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you could just, but the way the movie's structured, you could think it actually happened.
But it could just be magical, man. It honestly, the movie is almost a statement on what you believe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I thought it was fantastic.
It sounds like fun.
I don't know. Can you watch it anywhere else? But I always like to check. Hold on. Is it anywhere else that's not the Criterion channel? It's probably rentable. Oh, no, it is. It's available. You can watch it for free. Tubi's got it. Plex has it. Freevee has it. So you can watch this for free. It looks like you can probably rent it too. If you have Criterion, you have it. It's on there. But it's a really, my telling does not do any real justice to the movie as usual because it's so atmospheric. And there's so much that's done with the soundtrack and the sounds of things. Like the first time you see Alan Bates,
you should totally watch True Detective.
Oh, probably. It's one of those things where every once in a while I think, I've got to actually go watch that. But I don't have Max at the moment, so I'll probably, when something else comes out on Max, I'll subscribe and I'll watch it.
Yeah.
But I do like the fact that it has exceptionally good ratings on iTunes. This is obviously not a movie I've suddenly discovered.
It sounds like a solid movie. It's got a solid cast and the story is cool. It's just, honestly, it's probably just too open ended for a few people who sit there and go, "Wait, what happened?"
Yeah. Ethereal, dreamy, and well-made tale of the bizarre. Yeah, yeah. Someone described it as a well-made and acted but ultimately rather pointless fable. Well, boy, did you miss out on what the point of it was. Yeah. So I liked it. Like I said, the plus is you can watch it for free with ads, but you can watch it kind of almost because Tubi, as I always say, doesn't require an account. So you can watch it for free without even having to have an account. But it is a very, very British, very atmospheric, weird little movie that's about basically three people in a little town, or maybe it's not. It is or it isn't. And that's what's fun about it is you can look at it and you can watch it and you can interpret it however you want. And honestly, nobody can tell you you're wrong. So if you see it and you're like, no, this all happened. He's a magician. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong because nothing in the movie says you're wrong. I just don't think so. And that's the beauty of movies like this. You can kind of read them however you want. So on that note, go read Lando's mind-bending piece of
a weird science article. Yeah.
Then if you want to just look at something that's bizarre and non-linear and weird, you can watch The Shout for free. And that's it. So and the fives will come back. I'm done with the October of late nights is over. I will start doing fives again. Honestly, I think doing all this editing has given me a new appreciation for how much simpler the fives are. I just have to keep them to 5 minutes, and then I just have to save them with a file name, and then it's done. So, yeah. That's it. Have a wonderful weekend. We will talk to you again next week. Visit OzoneNightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes, browse through our back catalog, or to find links to support the show. Follow @OzoneNightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 280 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. The opening theme for the show is provided by Heartbeat Hero. The closing theme is provided by Ogre. Please visit and support these artists using the links in the show notes for each episode.